Justice making himself available to the media to deal with issues that the media may wish to deal with. So here I am. I will be ready to deal with questions that you may have. Thank you.
Maybe to assist the process, Acting Chief Justice, I will ask the colleagues to introduce themselves when they do ask the question, and the media house they represent. But I have received two questions.
Yeah.
I suppose on the lighter note from Daily Maverick, they just want to know what is your favorite book and what do you do for fun.
When did I last have fun? There are a number of books that I've read, but there is no particular one that I can mention now as my favorite book. But I have read a number of books which I found very, very useful. I hope that after the completion of the commission report, I will have some time for a little bit of fun. Maybe I can mention this, and that I'm thinking that I might be available for about 45 minutes to an hour. So it might be important for everybody to have an idea how much time we have.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. For show of hands, I note you, I note you, I note you, and I note you. That one. Over to you.
It's Samkele Masebo from the SABC. Congratulations once again to the Chief Justice.
Thank you, Samkele.
For your appointment. But to get to the core of the business, you have been appointed into this position on the backdrop of the JSC recommending you last for this particular position, and you've had a tiff with some politicians referring to you as very white, which you may find as an insult or maybe not. But just being appointed into this position, knowing very well we don't have to support that much of the JSC members, such as Julius Lema and other commissioners within the JSC, how does that make you feel? Two, do you feel as if you were put into this position because you may be perceived to have a gun to the head of President Cyril Ramaphosa on the state capture report, particularly on the allegations pointed against him when it comes to Glencore and the sale of that particular mine and the influence he had, allegedly had, with the Glencore when it comes to their core business at Eskom? And then lastly, the ANC's National Chairperson and Minister of Mineral Resources, Raymond Zondo, is not seemingly chuffed with your report, the second part of the report, when it comes to his role of and how he benefited from African global operations, formerly trading as Musasa. How do you feel with some politicians already taking aim at the state capture report? Lastly, don't you feel as if your appointment as the Chief Justice of the country will be campaigned, knowing that there are some who've already hinted that they will be keeping you very busy in the court when it comes to the State Capture Commission report? Thank you.
Before we respond, ACJ, perhaps I should have indicated that
Yes.
You are here today as the Chief Justice-elect, not as the Chairperson of the State Capture Commission. I'm sure it's going to be difficult for colleagues to make that distinction because it's the same person. But yes,
I think I can see the smile on some girl's face. Let me say this, Samgelo. The Judicial Service Commission dealt with the interviews in the manner in which it dealt with them. It made certain decisions. But I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that now that the president has made the decision that he has made, all members of the JSC will work very well with me. I have no doubt in my mind that I will work very well with them. I had the opportunity in October last year, as you all know, to chair the Judicial Service Commission when it had that session of interviews. I can tell you that I found absolute cooperation and respect from all members of the JSC. You mentioned Mr. Malema. I want to say that during that session, Mr. Malema was very courteous, was very respectful, was very constructive in his input in deliberations, discussions. I am confident that we are going to work very well. I'm not concerned at all. After all, as you will be aware, they also issued a statement welcoming my appointment. So I think we are going to work quite well. It looks like all your other questions may have related to the state capture. Okay.
Just this part, Chief Justice, will this appointment of yours to this position in CG, will it not be harmed on the virtue that you may be kept very busy in the courts with those who may be wanting to take these particular reports on judicial review, just in the position of yourself as CG? What then happens if you are in continuous litigation with those who may not be happy with your reports? No,
it won't at all. You will recall that this was one of the questions that a number of members of the JSC asked during the interview. It won't at all. When you have chaired a commission and you have issued your report and somebody takes it on review, you decide as the chairperson of the commission, excuse me, as the chairperson of the commission, whether you are going to oppose or not to oppose, or file any papers without opposing to explain certain decisions or aspects of your report. But it won't at all. It will not interfere at all as far as I'm concerned. And you will have seen that the parts of the report that have been released are quite detailed. And part of the reason for that is to show that the findings that the commission makes are not findings that it just makes out of nowhere. They are findings that are based on a consideration of evidence and analysis of evidence. It doesn't mean that the report will not will be 100% correct in every respect. Nothing is perfect. But what we have sought to do is to do all we can to try and make sure that all findings that we make, people can see how we arrived at them, and they are based on an analysis of evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Deputy Chief Justice and future Chief Justice. First off, if you could please just tell us how you learned of your appointments to lead the judiciary and what your reaction was. Who told you? Then my second question, considering you have a short term in office, what is the one thing you want to look back on and say you achieved as leader of the judiciary? Thirdly, in which areas will you most depend on your deputy, who we know from the President will most certainly be Justice Mandisa Maya from the Supreme Court of Appeal? Where will you most need her help? And then you said when you interviewed for Chief Justice that you wouldn't want future judges to be put off leading inquiries because it might thwart their chances of being considered as a Chief Justice. How are you going to negotiate completing your work at the Zondo Commission or the State Capture Inquiry with being the head of the judiciary, not least because our very president appointed you as chief and has been implicated in some of the claims of the Zondo Commission. And then lastly, KwaZulu-Natal Premier Sihle Zikalala said this week, quote, "While we all have to respect and uphold the independence of the judiciary, we need to review the dilemma imposed by the system of constitutional democracy. This system places one organ of state above others." You spoke very publicly about a cabinet member who criticized our constitutional dispensation. What is your response to this comment, and perhaps particularly this part of the quote? This system places one organ of state above others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The first question is how I learned of my appointment. I was told by the president. On the day in question, I was part of the court hearing a certain matter, and I was informed by my staff that the president wished to see me at 2 p.m. I didn't know whether we would be done by then. They should tell the presidency that I was in a hearing, but when we are done, I will come and see him. So I was able to see him, I think, just before 3 o'clock. So he's the one who told me. My reaction was I think I felt what I can describe as the heaviness of the responsibility that comes with this kind of appointment. But I was happy that I was appointed. I think my mind quickly moved to what might lie ahead and the responsibilities that come with this position. I felt honored because I do think that it's an honor to be appointed as a judge in the first place, but to be appointed as the Chief Justice of the country is a special honor. It gives one an opportunity to serve the people in a very special way. So I felt quite honored and privileged by the appointment. With regard to the question of the one thing that I would like to make sure I've done during my term of office, it is something that I mentioned at the interviews. I said that many years ago, the former Chief Justice, Justice Ngobo, had set up a committee or team that looked into the question of institutional independence for the judiciary. The question they had to answer was what type of institutional independence we in South Africa as a judiciary should have. And they looked at various models and came up with certain proposals. Those proposals included the establishment of what we now know as the OCJ. But there were 3 phases that were to be done, and those phases have not been completed. And you will recall that actually I credited former President Mr. Jacob Zuma because he is the one who acceded to the request for the OCJ and established it. And he deserves credit for that. But we need to move beyond that and make sure that all those phases are completed. So if I could ensure that by the time my term of office ends, the judiciary of South Africa has attained that institutional independence, I would be very happy, because the independence of the judiciary is critical to sustaining our constitutional democracy. We might be here today, at some stage we won't be here, but if we leave behind a judiciary that is truly independent, then we can have peace that our democracy will be protected. So that is the one thing that I would really like to achieve. With regard to in which areas would I like Justice Maya to assist me, should I say if or when she is appointed as DCJ? Well, I won't say right now, but she certainly will play a very important role, and I will have a discussion with her, and I have absolutely no doubt that she is going to make a very big contribution.
The hardest one.
Is that the Zigalala one? Well, let me respond this way. Everyone is entitled to have their view about our constitutional dispensation, and they may express their view. But all the power that the judiciary has is power that has been given to it by the Constitution. The Constitution was passed by Parliament. So our Constitution envisages the judiciary performing certain functions. It performs those functions in accordance with the Constitution, and I do not think that it performs functions that it should not perform in a constitutional democracy such as ours. I think that it performs the kind of functions that it should perform. Obviously, Premier Sigalala may be disgruntled about certain decisions, but those decisions are taken in accordance with the Constitution.
I must apologize. I, in fact, jumped to perhaps the second most difficult question.
Yes.
The outstanding one is the idea of being rewarded for the tension of finishing your work as chair of the commission and being head of the judiciary.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't hear how, but I didn't finish it. As things presently stand, I'm due to complete the report at the end of April, which would mean that it will only be 1 month after my appointment has taken effect. But you must remember that for the past 9 months or so, I have been the acting Chief Justice. I have been doing some work that requires the Chief Justice, but also continuing with the work of the Commission. I want to say that my colleagues in the Constitutional Court have been extremely supportive during this time. They have been very understanding. They have been very prepared, excuse me, to make sure that I'm able to do both. And I've delegated some of the things that I should do, and they have very kindly accepted. So the cooperation and support that I have from my colleagues will continue, and I will be able to handle both. Also, in relation to other leadership issues, the heads of court have been very supportive throughout this 9-month period. They have been very cooperative. We have been working very well. I have no doubt that during the remaining part of my work on the Commission, they will continue to give that support and cooperation.
Thank you very much. My name is Pelan Hadian from Museum Africa. Congratulations once more incoming CJ.
Thank you.
I'm not sure about the effect that was it. Well, some of the questions might sound like they're repetition, but hopefully you'll be able to clarify those who see that. On Human Rights Day, the rights leader, Julius Malema, really slammed the judiciary, saying it is captured. So I was hoping that we can get a reaction from you, because he is a JSC member. So maybe you, as the incoming Chief Justice and acting Chief Justice, you might have a sentiment as far as that is concerned. Second one is, are you not concerned about the continuous rhetoric that the High Court Gauteng or the High Court Pretoria division in that fact is set to be continuously ruling in favor of President Cyril Ramaphosa, your appointer in this regard? And of course, going back to my colleague's question, that it looks like it's a favored appointment in that regard, that the Gauteng High Court in the Pretoria division seems to be ruling mostly all the time the president. And the third one is that the former Chief Justice had some time in your position. They've already identified the colleagues as some of the things that you want to put on. I'm sure the JSC is one of them that you want to be remembered for. But in just 2 years, do you think you would have achieved some of the things that you desire as a leader? I'm sure there's a lot of things you would have desired to complete. And just the last one, it's a follow-up to what you just said, the constitutional democracy. Truly independent in your view is, do you think we have a long way to realize that true independence post the completion of all the spheres that you've talked about, implementation? The Office of the Chief Justice has now been implemented, so all the spheres, once they have been implemented, we have then truly realized constitutional independence.
Thank you. Let me start with the last one. I think once we have achieved the model of institutional independence that we have told the executive we want to have, which was the product of the research that I've told you about, we will be satisfied that we have got true independence within the context of South Africa. That's one. Two, the allegations that the judiciary is captured are very serious allegations. They should not be made lightly by anybody, because it is not in the interests of anybody who loves this country to portray our judiciary as captured. And if anybody has got evidence that any judge is captured or the judiciary is captured, they must come forward with evidence. Now, I want to refer in a very limited way to the Commission. I know that we said we are not going to talk about the Commission, but you will recall that in the past, allegations have been made, for example, that there were certain judges who received money in order to decide cases in a certain way. The former Chief Justice spoke publicly and said, please, anyone who has got evidence supporting those allegations must come forward. Up to now, I'm not aware of anybody who has come forward with evidence of that. It is wrong to make allegations that there are judges who have been paid money in order to decide cases in a certain way when there is no evidence. You are all aware of the Judicial Conduct Committee that we have in South Africa, which is the body to which anyone who has such evidence must go and present evidence to say this judge and that judge and that judge have been involved in corruption. And of course, a judge who is captured, that should really be reported. And you know that the Judicial Conduct Committee conducts inquiries in order to establish whether complaints against judges are well-founded or not. You are aware that in the past few years, you may or may not be aware, but in the past few years, since I became DCJ, because that was one of the responsibilities that the former Chief Justice gave me, members of the Judicial Conduct Committee have issued various recent judgments on complaints. The Judicial Conduct Committee is a committee of judges which looks at issues or complaints against judges without fear, favor, or prejudice. They can be harsh on their own cause. I think at the interviews in February, I made an example of a case where I sat with two colleagues on appeal, where somebody had appealed against a decision. I just can't remember whether it was the judge against whom there had been a complaint or it was the complainant against a certain judge president. And we came to the conclusion that the judge president concerned had not conducted himself in a proper manner, and we decided that he should be reprimanded. And we invited him to come to be reprimanded. He came, he subjected himself to the processes of the Judicial Conduct Committee, and I had to issue the reprimand, which he accepted. So you know about other judgments. So if anybody makes allegations that judges are captured or some judges corrupt or whatever, there is a body which looks into complaints against judges, allegations, and issues its judgments without fear or favor. Why are people not taking their complaints to that body? So I would simply say one respects whatever views people have, but please, if you are going to make allegations of misconduct, of criminality against judges, do so if you have evidence and follow the processes which are there to deal with such matters. Now, I guess maybe that also answers your question about the Gauteng division. I just want to add this with regard to the Gauteng division. I know that for some time, certain people have been making allegations along those lines. But I'm yet to see any one of them who has taken the trouble to look at various judgments, analyze them, and show how it can be said that the decisions that have been arrived at in those judgments are decisions that cannot be supported by any evidence, but simply that they are a manifestation of a biased mind on the part of the judges concerned to find in favor of the president, even when there is no evidence supporting that, even when the law does not support that. I think it's important for me to make this point. Judges make decisions. They are required to make those decisions in accordance with their oath of office, without fear, without prejudice, without favor. That doesn't mean that they can't be wrong. Of course, they can be wrong, and we know that appeal courts reverse their decisions from time to time. But as long as those decisions are arrived at in good faith, we should accept that. So I would appeal to the public to learn, when they disagree with judgments of the courts, to learn to say, maybe that's how the judge sees the matter in good faith. I don't agree, but it doesn't mean that he or she is captured, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he or she didn't like the other party. It might just be a wrong decision that is arrived at in good faith, as could happen with anybody. We should be slow to impute all kinds of motives when judges perform their duties. So I would say that until somebody is able to demonstrate by analyzing judgments and be able to arrive at a conclusion justifiably, that if you analyze each one of the following judgments, the only conclusion that can be reached is that this judge was not acting in good faith in arriving at this decision. Until somebody can show that, I do not think that one should take these allegations seriously. I hope I've dealt with all your questions.
Many things to deal with in your 2-year tenure.
Okay, yes. Well, I think your question was whether I think I'll be able to complete all that I wish to complete within 2 years. Obviously, I've got to, when I look at what I want to achieve, I've got to look at the time I have. I've got to be realistic. I can't be looking at something that will take 10 years when I'll be there only for a shorter period of time than that. So I believe that I will achieve the things that I've identified are doable within this period, one of which is the one that I mentioned earlier on. But I will also be seeking to lay a foundation for any other things that may be long-term. You must remember that I have been the Deputy Chief Justice for, I think, close to 5 years now, from 2017 June. I've been part of the leadership of the judiciary, even when I was in the commission. I might not have been fully involved in everything, but the former Chief Justice made sure that he consulted me, that we had discussions on certain important issues. I've been part of that leadership that has done certain work that needs to be continued and improved. But even before that, I was part of the leadership of the judiciary for about 11 years, from 1999 to 2010, when I was Judge President of the Labour Appeal Court, under various Chief Justices. Chief Justice Mohammed, I was part of the leadership when he was Chief Justice. Chief Justice Chaskalson, I was part of the leadership of the judiciary when he was Chief Justice. Under Chief Justice Langa, I was part of the leadership of the judiciary when he was Chief Justice. Chief Justice Nobo, I was part of the leadership of the judiciary when he was the Chief Justice. And for a number of years, I was not part of the leadership when Justice Mogoeng was Chief Justice. But from 2017, I have been part of the leadership of the judiciary under his leadership.
Justice Zondo, it's Alex Mitchley from News 24. I think these are around certain points you've already answered on, but I think it's perhaps asked in a little different manner.
Yes.
There does appear to be a loss of confidence in the judiciary and the rule of law. Just would like to know, what is your plan in restoring trust and confidence before your term ends? And then another one that's also just based off my colleague's earlier question about the Premier. There have been the calls for a parliamentary democracy, obviously, were based on allegations that the judiciary is producing rulings that are anti-transformation. So perhaps just to get your view on that allegation.
There may be many cases where we will make decisions that are unpopular. But if those decisions are in accordance with our oath of office, we have to be happy with them. We must accept that we can't, as judges, seek to make decisions that will make analysts praise us or write beautifully about us. We must seek to do justice. If in doing justice, people are happy, that's fine. But it must never be the case that we want to make decisions that will make us popular. We must be prepared to make decisions that are unpopular and suffer whatever we may suffer. But those who appreciate the judiciary and the kind of judiciary that our Constitution contemplates would appreciate that the kind of judges and magistrates that they have are the magistrates and judges that belong to a constitutional dispensation such as the one we have. So we are not going to seek to make popular decisions in order to gain the confidence. We will seek to do what the Constitution requires us to do. Thank you. I hope I answered both. Okay, thank you.
Before we take the second round, I received two questions from Ms. Diane Hawker of Times Live, which I think you've just responded to, similar to what was asked by Alex. And the second one comes from Mr. Vianney Green. It's as follows: how do you feel now that you will have to chair the JSC, a body which did not only recommend you, but ranked you the lowest amongst the contenders? Secondly, the Premier of KZN is reported to have called for a return to parliamentary sovereignty instead of the system we have. Your thoughts?
Let me start with the last one. I think I've responded to the last one. Let me not say anything further, but the system that we have, there was a good reason why it was decided upon, and it's good for our country. As far as the JSC is concerned, I have indicated that my view is that they performed their functions in the way they performed them. They made the decisions they have made. When I chair the proceedings, I believe that everybody will be committed to the performance of our functions in a proper manner. And I have absolutely no doubt that there will be 100% cooperation and that there will be respect for everyone. As I said, if the sessions of if the October session is anything to go by, the interviews in April will go very well. So I'm satisfied that irrespective of whatever decisions the JSC may have made about individual candidates and about me, when we meet, we will be meeting to perform a function, to do a job that we are supposed to do, and we'll do that job, I think, to the best of our abilities, and everybody will be cooperating. As I said, they also have welcomed my appointment. My understanding is that even though they may have made a certain recommendation, they always accepted that the president could appoint any one of the candidates. And once the president had appointed me, my understanding is that they accepted and they welcomed my appointment. So I think we will work very well.
Thank you. ACJ, we will take the second round. I noted the hand at the back. Gentlemen, I can't see it because of the mask, and then go to Mr. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is
Yes. If you don't mind, can you just raise your voice? I want to make sure I hear your question. Yes.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
Following the interviews for the vacancies of the Constitutional Court last year and the interviews for CJ last month, there have been calls that the JSC should be reviewed, the workings of the JSC should be reviewed. Perhaps putting in place a code of conduct for commissioners in the JSC. Is it something that you would like support and in what shape and form to take in keep that review the
Thank you. On the 4th of April, the JSC will have a meeting. In that meeting, they will discuss various issues, including the mandate of the JSC. They will discuss a number of issues that may be of concern to members of the public and others to some members of the JSC. And I think that all the issues that you raise would be discussed. But I must indicate that the JSC already decided in October, in that session that I chaired, that there was a need for a meeting at which the JSC would interrogate and discuss intensely its mandate, its entire mandate. I'm saying that they decided in October. I didn't chair the session in April and before that. It may well be that they were just reaffirming a decision that they may have taken much earlier. So there has been a realization on the part of members of the JSC that there's a need for a discussion of various issues. They called it their mandate. And I think that one of the things they seek to do is to ask the question, how are we carrying out our mandate? What is our mandate? How far does it go? And how are we carrying it out? Are we doing it the proper way? Or should we look at another way of doing things? So I think they would be discussing all of those things. And I'm confident that the discussions will be very constructive. Yes.
On your predecessor, have you spoken to former Chief Justice before you joined? What are the discussions around? How is he feeling about your appointment?
So I'm going to want to hear all the things that he and I talk about.
Then lastly, you were together sometime 2 or 3 years ago in Kempton Park at the Nelson Mandela lecture by his foundation, the late president. The BMCG said there is an attempt to capture the judicial. That video is very viral on social media spaces. Do you share the same sentiments as Mokwan that there is an attempt to capture the judicial?
Let me start with the first question. The former Chief Justice and I talk almost every day, but I won't share with you what we discuss. But we talk all the time. We talk all the time. Look, put it this way. From time to time, one does see certain actions which really appear to be attempts to capture the judiciary. But as far as I know, the former CJ has never said those attempts have succeeded. So from time to time, one does see certain conduct that seems to come across as attempts. But as far as I'm concerned, those attempts have not succeeded. And I would do everything I can to make sure that they don't succeed. And I think it's the duty of all judges as well as all people who love our constitutional democracy to make a contribution that such attempts don't succeed. Thank you.
I do not see any hands. Okay, there is one.
Thank you again. I think I may have omitted my title and position, so it's Aaron Bates from Business Day.
Yeah, no, I know you. Yeah.
So first off, how does the public know the Judicial Service Commission is functional when its decisions are kept under wraps? That process, the deliberations behind closed doors, are entirely secret. My second question is, you want to accomplish independence of the Office of the Chief Justice, but how are you going to overcome an impasse you yourself mentioned on Judiciary Day in 2021 with the executive? And then lastly, incoming Chief Justice, I think this is a really important question for the people of this country. You were appointed by the President after a report which omitted any interrogation of his presidential funding for his campaign to lead the ANC. You go into this role having not dealt with that and having also made findings which provide a lot of arsenal against his political enemies. How can we as the country have faith that you have not been rewarded for doing that, and that you are going to be a leader worthy of the position you are soon to hold?
Thank you. Can I ask that you give me each question one at a time, because I was trying to make a note. Let's take one. I think you have three, yes, or is two. Take one and repeat the first one, then I'll answer that, and then, yeah.
The first question is, how can the public know the JSC is functional when all the deliberations are behind closed doors?
Well, I think that one, the fact that the interviews are public and people can see what is happening is very important. Two, the fact that the outcomes are announced, the public gets to know who is to be appointed, who is not to be appointed, are very important in ensuring that the public can have confidence in whether the decisions that are taken are in accordance with what came out of the interviews. But three, the deliberations may be private, but as you know, if decisions of the JSC are challenged in court, those deliberations, the reasons given by the JSC will be known to the public. So ultimately, the public, there is a way in which the public can get to know. That is the one. Then the second one, I think I remember the second one. Yeah. Let me say this. Since the release of the report, I have not gone back to checking certain things, because the report, you will know, says the commission did not investigate that issue seriously because the public protector was investigating it. Now, my recollection is that at a certain stage, I had certainly said we must investigate it. But once I became aware, maybe I might have misunderstood the position, but my understanding was that at a certain stage, the public protector said she was investigating it. And my view was, this commission is the product of the public protector. There is no need for us to have processes that duplicate each other. If the public protector is investigating the same issue, there is no need for us to investigate the same thing. That was the reasoning. But having said that, I just want to say that I believe that the judiciary must be fearlessly independent. And I believe that that is for every judge and for every magistrate. But I believe that when you are in the leadership of the judiciary, there is even a greater responsibility to demonstrate your independence. I will never not make a finding against somebody because of anything other than there is no evidence or the law doesn't support that. I will never make a finding against somebody other than because the evidence justifies it and the law justifies it in my view. Maybe I can just mention a few things about my independence, and maybe because of your legal background, you know some of them. I believe I'm very, very independent. In 1999, I was appointed as acting judge president of the Labour Appeal Court. And while I was acting judge president, I sat in a matter with two very experienced High Court judges who were acting judges of appeal in the Labour Appeal Court. And we dealt with a matter. I had assigned the writing of the judgment to one of those judges. Actually, I think the one I had assigned to the matter to was somebody who had been a judge when I was still at university. That's how experienced, how senior they were. I had been a judge at that time, maybe for 3 or 4 years. They came to a certain conclusion in the matter. I disagreed with them, both of them. I disagreed. I wrote my own judgment and gave my full reasons why I disagreed with them. The fact that they had, maybe one or both had been judges when I was still a student was neither here nor there. I had been a judge for 3 or 4 years. I disagreed with them. I wrote my judgment. That judgment, that matter went on appeal to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court upheld my judgment. That's one. Two, you might or might not have heard of a judgment called Modisa, which I gave in the Labour Appeal Court also as judge president. That was a matter which was about whether workers who go on strike are entitled to be heard by an employer before an illegal strike, and to be heard before an employer can dismiss them. There have been various judgments in the Industrial Court, in the Labour Appeal Court of pre-1994, in the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Appellate Division, which went in different directions. I examined case law stretching over about 15 years and disagreed with a number of judgments and came up with the conclusion that those workers would be entitled to a hearing. There was some noise after the judgment had come out from employers, but as far as I know, that judgment remains the law, and I think it was subsequently approved by the Supreme Court of Appeal. It may well have been approved by the Constitutional Court as well, but I'm not sure. Three, when I was appointed to the High Court in Pretoria in 1999, just another example. I remember that I had to sit with a colleague where there were applications for admissions of attorneys and advocates. And I discovered that when I looked at the papers, I realized that many applications for admissions did not comply with a certain statutory provision. So I said to the colleague who was taken to be senior, because he had been to that court earlier than me, I said to him, I didn't think that we should grant those applications. He was surprised, and he thought we should grant them. But it appeared that there had been a practice, that's what I heard from him, over many years, in terms of which various judges in that court would grant applications even if they didn't comply with that particular requirement. I said I was not going to be party to that. I believed that the applications did not comply with the Act, and a practice cannot overrule a statute. And I said I would not be party to granting any orders along those lines. We went to court. We couldn't agree. We went to court. He asked me to raise my issues with counsel. The motion court was full. I raised my issues. The issues were common to a number of applications. The counsel tried to argue. We had this debate, but ultimately, my recollection is that counsel decided, look, we think we'll go and fix this. So I stood my ground. I said, I believe the law has not been complied. Somebody will have to persuade me that it has been complied. If it hasn't been, that's it. So that was sorted out. I think the following day there was an adjournment. The following day applications were sorted out and were fixed. There are other examples. One last one. In the second, if not first matter in which I sat in the Constitutional Court as an acting judge in 2011, maybe early 2012, I disagreed with the majority in this first or second matter. I didn't agree with the majority. I wrote my own dissenting judgment. I was just maybe a month or 2 months in the court, being the most junior. I wrote my own judgment. Ultimately, a few colleagues supported my judgment. I was in the minority. So I believe that I'm strongly independent, and that will remain.
Are you as strongly independent in the face of political disagreement as you are in the face of judicial disagreement? Because your examples are all disagreements with other judges, not with the head of state or someone senior in the governing party.
Well, I think I am, but obviously one has had certain experiences, and that those might be an indication of the type of judge that I am. I believe that I can handle any political pressure. Thank you.
We have gone over by 15 minutes or so.
Yes.
But there's just one last question from Mail and Guardian.
Mm.
The lady wants to ask, there is considerable logistical disarray at the Constitutional Court. Judgments are reserved far too long. Is this a pressing issue? Yeah, I think that's the only question.
No, it's a legitimate question. Yes, it is a pressing issue. And yes, it is a matter that is receiving my attention. Not only my attention, but also the attention of my colleagues. There are challenges in the Constitutional Court in terms of certain judgments taking longer than they should. There have been challenges with regard to the speed with which we dispose of applications. But as I indicated during the interview in February, with regard to disposing of applications, we have put in place a new system which seems to be working quite well to ensure that we dispose of applications reasonably quickly. We are looking at the issue of reserved judgments. I am confident that in due course we are going to sort out that problem as well. So we accept that it's a legitimate criticism and we are dealing with it head on. I think in due course we will sort it out.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Acting Chief Justice. That's the end of the media briefing. I don't see any hands.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I must say that we as South Africans need to continue to be grateful to the role of the media in our country. And now I'm going to go a little bit to the Commission for the sterling work that journalists have done on the basis of which a lot of the work of the Commission has been facilitated. We really appreciate the role you play. We know that sometimes it's not easy, but continue to play the constructive role that you are playing. Thank you very much.